bring the idea, people laugh at you. The second stage is when they realize you're serious, they start to fight back. And then the third stage is they start saying that they've been thinking since the beginning it's a good idea. And then you know you're there.
over.
And it's true. Like you come up with, I say, let's squeeze everyone in the building, and they're joking. Then you realize you're serious, so they organize so that you don't successfully make the change. And one day they say, why weren't we doing this before? It's such a great idea. And I remember when you first brought this up, I said, good job. and it's just, but I do that for other stuff. On an energy piece, I'm open-minded, but at home, there's a lot of things that I don't want to change. You know what I mean? But
it's a hard habit to
It's
break.
hard, but you have to rethink. It's just the way you do things. But yeah, the space utilization is huge. And if you can use your roof at the same time, then you're fully.
Who are your counterparts on a municipal level? Like, do we have a sustainability department within the planning
You said
office?
that if an organization buys $200,000 worth of energy, that they then get one of you guys, right?
You should have a energy manager within the city, and you might even have a department.
Is there, so, I mean, in theory, there's somebody at the municipal level who's saying, hey, look, there's a new construction going up. Can we coordinate with the building next to them, to like on a macro scale?
Yeah,
what you're
so
doing?
on a macro scale, the planning department definitely will be involved in expanding a corporation like the Working with Lonsdale Corporation. And then you should have an energy manager.
Because I've never heard these conversations. I've been to how many council meetings now talking about public open houses for new constructions and new buildings, and these kinds of questions about like demand-side management, they're not being like publicly discussed. So there's obviously.
Capital University has an energy manager, and if they're serious about the site, then you would think that they would bring that person forward with them in order to.
But I'm just interested from a large scale, right? Like,
There are people at the city through that I've talked with, and I want to say engineering because I think our engineering and planning is together.
It would be.
Where a few things do come up, and a lot of it leads into Lonsdale Energy Corporation. So I'm wondering if there's a connection with Lonsdale Energy Corporation and the energy management. That might be kind of interesting to.
And Alex, I have one more thing to say, because I've only ever lived on the North Shore, and when you said that, people, when they build because they like the windows and they like the view, a lot of what's happening, especially in the city of North Vancouver, has to be taken with a grain of salt, because that is really only a 3 to 5 year view unless you're on the waterfront. So they should be building much smarter as we're moving down the hill, which was once a view on 12th is now a view on 9th, which is now a view on 7th. And so those windows could become a much more warmer, energy efficient type of an environment. So when you buy, you're only buying a view for this length of time. And then because, as they keep telling us, nobody owns a view and nobody's entitled to a view. So that is something that I don't think that builders really realize. And I walk into some display suites and walk out with young people, and I say, and explain to them exactly, and see this and this and this, and they go, yeah, and they said, you just saved me $500,000. Because why are you buying it? I'm buying it for the view, and I said that view is gone in 3 to 5 years.
I've never heard that comment before, but it's a good point. And maybe actually you don't want a window on a certain side because what's coming up there, you don't want to see it.
Build it down the LED bit, but build it not with the floor-to-ceiling windows for that view, because that is gone, and you're in the back end of another building where you could have a much more intimate, more surround view inside. And
that's where education and going back to the people thing is, unless we talk about these things, a developer to a certain extent is motivated by self-interest, right? Of course, it depends. Like not everyone, and it's nice to sell you the idea that you're gonna have a view forever, So if we're more educated, we can make better decisions, right?
We should build better. We should build smarter in the beginning.
Nice. So we're going to move on to some questions for Tyler. So Tyler, could you comment on the idea that gathering spaces are useful for building community.
Yeah, probably, you know, when I got started, like at university, it was mentioned that I spent time in the former Yugoslavia. It was immediately after the war. Well, the war was still kind of cleaning itself up. It was right after there was an ethnic cleansing campaign by the Croat army called Operation Lightning that cleaned out a couple 100,000 Serbian people from central Slavonia. And as soon as they accomplished that, they then told the United Nations Protection Force that they were no longer necessary. And so those guys were kind of going, like the United Nations people who were left in Croatia were going nuts and trying to figure out what they could get done. So they were contacting universities like mine, seeing if they could get people like me to go into the remaining Serbian communities to basically be a foreign presence that would be unarmed and all that. And you know, being there right at the end, right when people were still extremely nervous to even go outside their homes, you know, it was really interesting to see like the immediate tasks at hand. As soon as we were able to build confidence for people to go out into the community and to be able to do something, was the rehabilitation of the gathering spaces, and as well as digging out the ditches. But and producing food. But you know, going in and fixing up the old school, going in and fixing up the old community center, which had like a ping pong table, making sure that there were ping pong balls, because there weren't ping pong balls. You know, they lost their ping pong, but this, just making sure that that kind of thing happened, brought people out of their shells, loosened up their arms, you know, gave them a capacity to have the conversations that allowed them to do the things that might be important, like cleaning up the ditches, which is vital. You know, you can't have cow piss piling up in your ditch. You need that to flow down. Okay, rudimentary systems, but like you need that to go away. And to be able to come up with like all the different kinds of like really everyday life things that they need to resolve. And having a new coat of paint in the old school building gave people the confidence to invite somebody in from the outside, right? And then to be able to conduct different types of workshops. And so just the engines of community's capacity to really do anything is built up by having and valuing gathering spaces, and making a diversity of them, and making them accessible. And you know, there was a number of different kind of gathering systems that were there. One of them was there was the old Orthodox Church. Now that was seen predominantly as just the thing for Orthodox people, but Muslims went too, you know, because it was just a community thing. And then there was the village house, the schoolhouse, and in addition to that, there's this old tradition of people sitting on benches in front of their houses. So in front of the in front of the fence of everyone's house in this particular village, there were benches. And people would go and sit on those benches. And when you're walking down the street, you would go and join someone who was sitting on their bench. And revitalizing the tradition of siesti. They call it siesti, which means to sit. It's just the tradition of sitting. You know, when you revitalize that tradition, it's just amazing how communication revitalizes as well. Oh, there's a party going on up at the top of the hill. You know faster than the telephone. They didn't have telephones in the village at the time. But anyway, I guess that's kind of a way of illustrating kind of how important gathering spaces are to building community and for communities to kind of figure out who they are and what they can do and what sort of capacities they might but yeah, that kind of drove it home for me when I was 20.
It sounds neat that even benches can do that.
Yeah.
Even just simply having a network of benches
Yeah.
can do that. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, but those benches, what's really special about those benches, and more special than any of the benches that might be down there, is that they were connected with the intimate space of each individual that lived along those places. And there was a history of conversations that took place on those benches. And there was the personalities of the people who lived there and had lived in the houses that were next to those benches. And there was the memory of the old lady who passed away who used to sit on the bench every day as you pass it. There's like all kinds of different things that sometimes when things are really integrated into the practices of everyday life and into owned space, it's different than a city going, we're going to put up some park benches and we'll have
Were they fixed benches?
park
Tyler?
benches. There were all kinds of different benches, and it really depended. There was one couple, they had a big stump in front of their house, and then they put up a few benches around it. And that was a real key gathering place, and that was near the crossroads of the town. And then others whose houses might be up a little bit of a hill before you come to their fence would have just like a single bench in
So
front.
it sounds like finding a bench and like just sort of moving it because the sun's going that way. Or...
Some were like that, and one was, there was this chestnut tree, and a guy had built his into the chestnut tree, and it had a front bench on top, so it was a high chair, with a bench on it, and he would sit there and have a beer or eat chestnuts, you know, like, and kind of so each family would kind of create their own
Circle.
would create their own circle and react to their own environment, and that kind of like, you know, what I think is really beautiful about what you guys are saying is kind of the need to be reacting to the spaces that we're confronted with. Like, how do we interact with this particular landscape in order to maximize like our capacities for whether it be food production or energy, or you know, in what I would consider in community conversations, and how do you individualize that depending on what is there and what becomes established, yeah, like gathering spaces. If I can blab on for a bit, gathering spaces, you know, don't necessarily need to be seen just as the space where people gather, but it's also a space where ideas are accumulated and histories are accumulated. And if we think about them as gathering, instead of kind of installation spaces where you can take a group of ideas and install them on a site, the idea that things can gather and come together, and to find their own logics into one another, I think is interesting in considering any urban space. But I think if we're going to have meaning integrated into the spaces that we inhabit and the spaces that we gather in, having this accumulation of meanings and kind of accretive development is important, or else it's difficult to have that infusion of meaning.
Perfect. Thank you. We're going to shift gears a little bit for your next question, though, so it's not quite
Okay.
a little bit connected, but and it might lead into one of the other questions that I have. Are you referring to?
Yeah, Mike.
Do you want to
I
come
know.
up?
No, I'm not. I know. I'm good. I kind
Okay, because I'm thinking that it might be linked to the two questions ahead, but we'll go there.
All right.
So how does art break down barriers between people?
Okay.
And I think that segues into one of the other questions that
Sure.
we've got there, so
Yeah.
you might connect it.
Yeah. You know, art can make us art, whatever that is, really. And I'm probably more confused by that question, what the question of what art is than most. But it can it can create more